We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis Meseches Shevuos. This is Shevuos Daf 33b. On the previous summit, the Gemara asked, what if you have a situation of Shevuos ha'edus, but it's talking about a case of knas? In other words, the person administers an oath to witnesses and says, you should testify on my behalf in a case of a fine. So in such a situation, would we say that if they deny that they know testimony and they're lying, and they take an oath, would we say that they're liable to the Karban Shevuah by Shevuos ha'edus? And the Gemara is in the middle of bringing a proof from a Braisa. The Braisa says if you have a situation where a person administers an oath to the witnesses, and the case is Shahotzi Ish Ploni, Shemra Albiti, he says so-and-so, he was Motzi Shemra about my daughter, he married my daughter, and he said that she was not a Basula, and you know testimony about that. So Chayavin, so in that situation, they are liable. If they deny that they know testimony and they swear falsely about that, then they're going to be liable to the Karban Shavua by Shevuos ha'edus. But Hoda mi piatzmo pater, but if the person admits, so then we're going to say pater, we're going to say exempt. Rashi explains, Shahotzi Ploni Shemra Albiti, again, so-and-so was Motzi Shemra on my daughter. V'omar bebezdin, this person said in Bezdin, Lo matzasi levitcha besulam, I did not find that your daughter was a basula. V'nim sabadoi, it turned out it was false. V'lo hispachti lahamido sham bedin, I didn't get a chance to take him to court. L'tovo knas shel mea kesef, to claim from him the fine, which is on 100 kesef fine. And so over there again, the Braisa is saying that they are liable. Hoda mi piatzvo, then the Braisa said, let's say he admits on his own, bebezdin zeh shahotzi shemra bebezdin acher potter. If he admits, again, the situation is that he admits to, in this court, that he was motzi shemra, so then we're going to say that he's potter. And Rashi says, kasal kadai dachashta, right now we think, tiafilu bo edem la'achar shahoda kamar potter, that when we say over here in this brisa, hoda mi piatzmo potter, it means if the person admits he's potter, even if witnesses later come and say that he was a motzi shemra, v'katani hamashbia es ha'edem kodem hoda chayavin, and it's saying that if the person administers the oath to the witnesses before the hoda, so then they're liable. Alma mashbia ede kanas chayavin, so you see that somebody who administers an oath by witnesses of kanas, in fact, they are liable. This is a case of kanas, and it says that they are liable in this case. And the Gemara continues and says that we cannot bring a proof from this brisa because because who's the author of this brisa? It's actually Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon here. It's Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon that we mentioned earlier. Da'amar, who says Yavo Eidim v'Ya'idu. He actually says that in a case of admission, let's say a person admits to being Motzi Shemra. So when we say Moda B'Knas Pater, according to Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon, that just means if the only way we know about it is through admission, so that's not going to be Mechayev him. He is going to be Pater in that situation. But if he were to admit and witnesses would come, that's Yavo Eidim v'Ya'idu, let the witnesses come and testify. If they testify after the Hoda, so he actually is still liable. Now, if that is the case, if we're going to say that he's still liable even in a situation of Hoda, so according to Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon, there was never a question. According to Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon, it is obvious that in a case of Knas, we would say that if the Eidim deny that they know testimony, and you have a case again where they take a false Shvuah, Shevuos ha'edus, of course they would be liable in that situation, because you don't have the possibility of Moda B'Knas Pater when Eidim testify. Rashi explains, Hamani Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon, he, again, who's the author of this brayso? It's Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon, V'alibe lo iboili, according to him, we never asked the question, I never asked that question. Delididei have a knas mammon, because according to Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon, every case of a fine is mammon, kevan de lo miftar b'hodaso, because essentially Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon is saying that the hodah does not work. A person can try to admit, but if the witnesses come later, the person is still liable. The whole reason why it was a question by knas is because it's possible to admit, and so therefore, since it's possible to admit and get out of it, it might not actually be a chiyuv mammon, and in order to have Karban Shvuah, it has to be a monetary obligation. According to Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon, though, it always is a monetary obligation, because even if the person does admit, if Eidim come later, so again, we are going to say that the person is liable, and that's why the Braisa is saying that they are liable to a Karban Shvuah. Again, the Braisa is following Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon. But the Gemara says Amos Sefer, but then let us look again at the end of that brisa. How do we explain that? It says Hoda me'atzmo pater. It says if he admits on his own, he is exempt. Ason l'Rabbanan. That sounds like the Rabbanan, because again, the Gemara right now thinks it means that if he admits he's pater, even if witnesses come later. And the Gemara says no, that's not what it means. Kula Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon. He actually, the entire brisa is Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon. V'hachi kamar, and the brisa means to say as follows: Lo mashkachas lo hoda mi piatzmo de pater. There is no case where he admits and he's exempt. Elahecha deleka edem klal, only in a situation where there are no witnesses at all, v'hoda me'atzmo, and then he admits. If he admits and there are no witnesses, so the only way we know about it is through his admission, then he actually is pater, he's exempt. But if witnesses come after, he actually is chayiv. And again, if we're following Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon, there really was no question, then it's obvious that there's a liability of Karban Shvuah in terms of Shevuos ha'edus if they falsely deny that they know testimony. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Mashbiya ani aleichem. Let's say the person says, I'm administering an oath to you, Imlo savo v'sa'idu, if you don't come and testify, Sha'ani Kohen, that I'm a Kohen, or Sha'ani Levi, that I'm a Levi, or Sha'ani ben Grusha, Sha'ani ben Chalutza, or that I'm not the son of a divorcee, or I'm not the son of a Chalutza. Again, he's essentially saying that he's a Kohen and not a Cholol. He's not profaned from being a Kohen. Or let's say he says as follows, I'm administering an oath, She'ish Ploni Kohen, that so-and-so is a Kohen, She'ish Ploni Levi, or so-and-so is a Levi, She'eno ben Grusha, She'eno ben Chalutza, he's not a ben Grusha or ben Chalutza. Or the following case, She'onas ish Ploni esbito, let's say that so-and-so, he raped the daughter of so-and-so, or Upito esbito, or let's say he seduced the daughter of so-and-so, V'shechaval bi b'ni, or let's say that my son wounded me, V'shechaval bi chaveirai, or let's say my friend wounded me, this is going to be on Shabbos, or Shehidla Gedisha, or let's say he lit my stack of grain b'Shabbos, if he did those things on Shabbos, and so in such cases there's a death penalty and there's not going to be monetary payment. Hare elu peturin, in all of these cases, let's say the witnesses were to falsely deny, and swear falsely that they did not know testimony, they would be peturin, they would be exempt. And Rashi explains Shani Kohen Peturin. So in the case where the oath that's being administered is that they should swear that they don't know testimony in terms of the fact that he's a Kohen, again they swear falsely. So there we say they're exempt from carbon Shevuot Kedem Mefarish B'Gemara, like the Gemara explains She'ein ha'inyan medaber ela b'kfiras mammon, because the whole idea of carbon Shevuos ha'edus is if they deny knowing testimony, that involves a monetary case. But if it is simply a case about the person being a Kohen or a Levi, that would not qualify. And then the Mishnah said, Sha'onas ish ploni opita bito shal ploni. Let's say that so-and-so, he raped the daughter or seduced the daughter of so-and-so. Rashi says that means Sha'onas Ruvain bito shal Shimon. What the testimony would be is that Ruvain raped the daughter of Shimon. Ubito de Katani, when it says his daughter, it doesn't mean Ruvain's daughter, it doesn't mean his own daughter, it means the daughter of Shimon. Ubito de Katani ay ish ploni de le'el kai. The word bito is going on the word ish ploni that was used earlier, so it means he raped so-and-so's daughter. Tetana le'el minash ish ploni kohen o Levi ve'eno ben Grusha. We talked about ish ploni being a Kohen or a Levi or not a ben Grusha ve'oleh kai, so we're going on that. O sheishbion sha'onas ish ploni as bito shall also dairinan be'er hashta. Or again, he administered an oath to them that so-and-so raped the daughter of the person we've been discussing up until now. So Peturin, we say they're exempt in terms of carbon shvua, because in this case, it's relevant to a third party. Testify that so-and-so did something to somebody else, not to me, has nothing to do with me. That's not the toveya, that's not the main person who's making the claim, and so therefore they're exempt. Now, why do we need to teach this? Because we're going to talk about the fact that this is talking where he has a harsha, a person has a harsha. It means even though he's not really the main person making the claim, but he has authorization from the main person. But even afilu hachi, nevertheless, eino baldino bazu keshar moment. He's not considered to be the primary litigant like other cases. Demidi de lo mata liyade meolam lo mati lemichtav harsha lavi, because something which is never going to have any relevance to him, you can't write a harsha on that. And that the Gemara is going to mention that we're talking here in this part of the Mishnah about even in a situation where there's a harsha, where in a normal case of mammon, let's say that would be enough to make the person considered to be the primary claimant. That would not be true in this situation. And then the Mishnah had a case for Chaval bi b'ni chavolihi chabura. Chaval bi b'ni means my son wounded me, and it means to say that there was an actual wound where he would have been chayiv misa. So peturin. So again, in that case also, there's no carbon shvua. They're exempt. She'ein kan hefsid mammon. This is not a case of a monetary loss. She'im heyidu, because let's say they did testify hayah ben mischayiv misa v'lo mammon. That son would be liable to the death penalty, and he would not be paying money. And the last case is in the Mishnah, v'shachava bi chavera v'shehidla gas gedisha b'Shabbos. Let's say my friend wounded me or lit my stack of grain on Shabbos. Again, it means both cases on Shabbos. Shachava bi b'Shabbos, or hidla gedisha b'Shabbos. He wounded me on Shabbos or lit the stack of grain on Shabbos. The tarvayu chiyav misa ninu upturn. Again, those are both cases of a death penalty. It's not monetary cases, and that's why they are exempt. And the Gemara says, time with the ish ploni kohen, the ish ploni levi. It sounds like the Mishnah is saying the reason why they're exempt from carbon shvua is because the testimony is that so-and-so is a kohen, or that so-and-so is a Levi, and it sounds like specifically those cases because they're not monetary. Hamone leploni biad ploni. Let's say the testimony would have been that you should testify that so-and-so owes so-and-so a money. Again, it's not with regards to the person here administering the oath, it's somebody else, but since it's monetary, chayav, and the implication is that they would be liable to carbon shvu in terms of Shevuos ha'edus. That's what it sounds like from that part of the Mishnah. But hakatani seva, but yet at the end of the Mishnah it says, ad sheyishmu mi pi hatoveya, it says that you have to hear directly from the toveya, directly from the person that's making the claim, and that would seemingly apply in all situations. Therefore, or even by money. If it's not mipi hatovei, it's not going to be a carbon shvuah. That seems to be a contradiction within the Mishnayos. And the Gemara says, Amar Shmuel, Shmuel says, B'ba b'harsha. What we're talking about is a situation of ba b'harsha, meaning to say, if the person has authorization, so then by money, that actually would be sufficient to make that person who's coming with authorization, he's like the claimant. But if, let's say, we're talking about so-and-so being a Kohen or a Levi, that authorization would not be relevant, and that's what Rashi mentioned before. Rashi says, HaKatani Seifa, it says in the Seifa, Ad sheyishmu mipi hatovei, the Katani Seifa shilach biyad v'chulu. It says at the end that he sends again, Ad sheyishmu mipi hatovei. It uses that language of mipi hatovei. And then the Gemara answered, B'ba b'harsha, and Rashi says, Shemineu apetrabis alkach. He directly appointed him a caretaker for this. He has authorization. Hilkach itvias mammon he have him mechayvi. That's why, if it would be a monetary claim, actually there could be a liability. And when we're talking about, when we're implying in our Mishnah over here that it's only by ish ploni kohen or ish ploni levi where we say that there's no liability, but if it would be a monetary case, apparently there would be liability. That would be talking about a situation, again, as we said, of harsha. But the Gemara says, Va'amri Nahardoi, but didn't the sages of Nahardoi say, Lo chasvinan ur chasam metaltali, that you can't write a harsha when it comes to movable objects? So how do you even have a harsha over here? Rashi says, Urcha says harsha, again it's a harsha, it's an authorization. A metaltali, you can't do that when it's movable objects. Lefi she'eno be'ein, because of something that's not land, you can't really locate it. Va'edem eden al mashakasav machmas sheyeshli biyad ploni kach v'kach, and so the witnesses are testifying on what's written that so-and-so has this particular item, and so therefore in such a situation you can't even write a harsha. And here, what are we talking about? We're talking about regular monetary cases that involve money, involve movable objects. It doesn't involve land, so how can you say we're talking where there's a harsha? And the Gemara says to that, Hani mili hecha de kafri. That's true if the person denies it. Avalo kafri, but if there was no denial, so then kasvina, and then you actually could write a harsha even on movable property. Rashi explains, Hecha de Kafre means, Shekvar Nishmam Shahanitva Kafrin. If you already heard that the person being claimed from is denying it, so then you cannot write an authorization. The Hashda Michzi Kashikra, now already it looks like a lie, Shechosma Mashakasav Zesh Sheyesh Li Biad Ploni Kach V'Kach, that they're signing on what this person says, that he's owed this particular amount, and that already looks like a lie, so we don't allow an authorization in that case. But if the situation is not one where the Nitva denied it, so then you actually could write an authorization. And we will note over here that this idea that it's michsi kashikra, that it looks like a lie when you write a harsha, you write an authorization on movable property, because of the fact that in the harsha it states that this person is an agent to collect on behalf of so-and-so property that really is in dispute. That's why it's michsi kashikra. That comes from the Gemara in Baba Kama on Daf Ayin Amud Aleph. The Gemara mentions this idea that it's michsi kashikra. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Minayin shein hakasa medaber ela b'tvias mammon. How do we know that the pasuk by Shevuos ha'edus is talking specifically about monetary claims? Rabbi Eliezer says, Nemar kan owen, it uses the word o over here by Shevuos ha'edus. V'nemar lahalan owen, and it also says further on the word o. Ma lahalan eino medaber ela b'tvias mammon. Just like over there we're talking about a monetary claim. Afkan eino medaber ela b'tvias mammon. So too over here we're talking about a monetary claim. The two psukim that we're talking about first, the pasuk by Shevuos ha'edus, it says v'nefesh kisecheta v'shama kol olav who aid o ra'a o yada, uses the word o, and then the second pasuk that we brought, nefesh kisecheta umola mal ba'Hashem v'kichesh ba'amiso b'pikadon, the person is denying a monetary claim, a pikadon o b'sasum esyad o b'gazal o ashak esamiso, and again it uses the word o, just like over there we're talking about monetary claims, so too over here we are talking about monetary claims. But the Brisa continues, O in derotzeach yochichu. What about the word O that is used by rotzeach? That's a reference to this pasuk. The pasuk says, "V'im besina yadafenu o hishlach Allah b'tzdiya vayamos o be'eva hiko b'yado vayamos mos yumas hamaka rotzeachu goel hadam yamis asarotzeach b'figovo." So over there by rotzeach it uses the word O as well. Shehein Oin, those are cases where the word O is used, or that's a case where the word O is used. Umidevarim shalo b'tvias mammon, and that's something that does not have to do with a monetary claim. And the Brisa says, "Don in Oin sheyeshi mohen shvua may Oin sheyeshi mohen shvua." We learn O from another case of O which involves an oath. V'al yochichu O in derotzeach she'eni mohen shvua. We're not going to bring a proof from the O by rotzeach where there is no oath. But the Brisa still continues, O in de sota yochichu. What about the O that is said by sota? That's a reference to the following pasuk: V'avar olav ruach kina v'kine es ishto v'hi nitma, o avar olav ruach kina v'kine es ishto v'hi lo nitma. And so there you see also by sota, it uses the word o, so that should prove shehein oin v'yeshi mo in shvua. There you have the word o that's used, and there's also an oath over there. Umidvarim shalo b'tvias mammon, and that's talking about things that are not a monetary claim. And so therefore, again, we should be able to prove from sota that it's not necessarily a monetary claim. And to that the Brisa says, "Don in oin sheyeshi moin shvua ve'eni moin kohen." We learn o from cases where there's an oath and no kohen. Me oin sheyeshi moin shvua ve'eni moin kohen. From another example where again there's a shvua and no kohen. Ve'al yochichu oin derotzeach she'eni moin shvua ve'al yochichu oin desota she'afa bi sheyeshi moin shvua yeshi moin kohen. You can't bring a proof from the o of rotzeach. There is no oath, and you also cannot bring a proof from the o of sota, even though there is an oath, but there is a kohen over there. And the Brisa continues with another opinion. Rabbi Akiva says, "V'hoya ki yesham la'achas me'ela." The pasuk says, "V'hoya ki yesham li'achas me'ela." What that means is yesh me'ela shu chayev. In some cases we say liable. V'yesh me'ela shu pater. In some cases we say exempt. Haketzad, how so? Tavu mamon chayev. If it's a claim of money, we say chayev. And if it's davar acher, if it's something else, pater, then we say exempt. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, Harehu Omer, the pasuk says, V'hu eid ora o yada. It says that he sees or he knows. And be'edas ha'miskayemes b're'iyah below yediyah, we're talking specifically about testimony that can happen by seeing but not by knowing. U'v'yediyah below re'iyah, or let's say by knowing and not by seeing. Hakasa medaber, that's what the pasuk is talking about. Re'iyah below yediyah ketzad. How do you have a case of seeing without knowing? That would be as follows. Monem monisi lach b'fnei ploni uploni. Let's say the person says, I counted out money to you in front of these two witnesses, so and so and so and so. And the person says, okay, yavo ploni uploni v'yoidu, so let so and so and so and so come and testify. So here they're just testifying to the fact that they saw the money counted out. They have no idea whether it was a loan, whether it was a gift, but in this case, again, the defendant agreed. The defendant says, if you can produce witnesses that say that this money was counted out, then I'll pay. So zuhi re'iyah below yediyah, that would be a case of seeing without knowing. And yediyah below re'iyah, you can also have a case of knowing without seeing. Ketzad, how so? Mona hodesali b'fnei ploni uploni, let's say, says, you admitted to me that you owe me a money in front of so and so and so and so. And then he says, yavo ploni uploni v'yoidu, so let so and so and so and so come and testify. So this would be a case, zuhi yediyah, this is a case of knowledge below re'iyah, without seeing. They didn't actually see, let's say, the loan take place, but they have knowledge that the person owes money. And the Brisa continues with another opinion. Rabbi Shimon says, chayiv kan v'chayiv b'pikadon. We know that they're liable over here by Shevuos ha'edus and also by Shevuos ha'pikadon. Malahalan, just like over there, eino medaber le b'tvias mamon, we're talking about a monetary claim. Afkan eino medaber le b'tvias mamon. So too over here, we're talking only about a monetary claim. V'yod kal v'chomer. And furthermore, we can make the following kal v'chomer. Ma pikadon she'asa bo noshim kanashim. If by pikadon, where women are the same as men in that case, and krovim karachokim, relatives are the same as non-relatives, and psulim kekasherim, and whether they're disqualified or they're qualified to be witnesses, it's the same thing. V'chayev al, and they're liable for, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Dalid Amud Aleph.